Amelia swoops back onto the YouTube scene with a new hair color and a controversial video title likely to alienate half her audience and bore the rest. Let's get to it. So now that you've rage-clicked on this video and you're here, I just want to remind everyone that I love fandoms and I once made a whole video about how anyone should be able to like stuff in any way that makes them happy. But that doesn't mean that fandoms don't sometimes do or cause things that are annoying or problematic or ruin things. Convergence and fan culture are stronger and more mainstream than ever, which is great, but also just leads to some issues. A lot of times, the fandoms aren't even truly at fault. Take, for example, the Sherlock Doctor Who fan conglomerate, currently being helmed by a terribly flawed human being. Both are shows with huge fan followings in communities where people like to talk about their emotions and hyperbolize their reactions and shake their fists at Moffat, the entity, not the person. And Stephen Moffat, the person, has realized this power, and it has pretty much driven him mad, I can only assume. I think I remember him talking in interviews about how future developments were going to shock and traumatize the fans, because that's his whole brand, despite the fact that he doesn't actually kill characters. Anyway, he doesn't talk about how the plot or the story is going to be good or how the characters are going to be interesting. He talks about the fans, and I get that that's code, that's something a lot of writers say, and obviously writers want viewers of a thing to be happy with it. But I think it's pretty obvious with the last season of Doctor Who that the focus was on flash and bang and cheap twists and ploys for emotion, rather than any kind of narrative substance or character development. And Sherlock too. I really liked the third season of Sherlock, but it was full of pandering. I mean, it's one thing to put in a subtle nod to the fans, but Sherlock Season 3, the first episode, was another story entirely. If you've seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I appreciated it, I laughed, I cried, and after careful thought and consideration, I decided that I probably would have survived without that particular segment being a part of the main Sherlock canon, and actually would have preferred if something interesting had happened in that episode's plot. Put that in your little Christmas bonus minisode if you must, but please keep your overt pandering and references out of my main plot. If you follow me on Tumblr, you might have also seen some of my thoughts about the very end of the third season, which was, in my opinion, at best a cheap ploy, or at worst the beginning of a bad plot writing decision. And it's not just these shows. Supernatural, in my opinion, has its worst episodes when it's pandering or being overtly outlandish or self-referential. Even going way back to my darling Heroes, which was originally supposed to have a rotating cast of characters every season, but because the audience liked the characters of the first season so much, they kept them around after season 1, and if you watched Heroes, you may have noticed that after season 1, the quality of that program began to decline. In the end, I don't want writers to care about what I want. I want a lot of different things on a lot of different shows, and I acknowledge that a lot of those things are not remotely realistic or what is good for the show or the plot. I don't expect what I want to matter. I don't want writers to care about me because in the end, I don't care about me. I care about the story, I care about good writing and good character development. I want interesting and exciting things to happen, and I want them to happen well. A good example of both sides of this coin is Welcome to Vale, which is an amazing podcast that you should probably be listening to. I went to a live performance they had last fall, and while I really enjoyed it, it was also weird to be surrounded by this fandom for this weird thing. The show had lots of reference drops, and it had lots of people laughing and cheering at these things that were in references, but they weren't jokes and meaningful occurrences, they were just, things. Somebody mentions a glow cloud and the crowd goes wild. But then also, while until recently a lot of the fandom has been persistently interested in a lot of the aspects of the show that I found less interesting, the main podcast has gotten more and more exciting and interesting and plot-based, just as I dreamt it would. They're doing tons of touring, and they're certainly aware of their fan base and its interests, but the plot seems to have soldiered on without really any regard for any of that, which I love. And I also read an article just yesterday about how the producers of Game of Thrones have stopped paying attention to, comments on the internet because it is just too crazy. So I think there's kind of a dichotomy in this crazy new media world of convergence where on the one hand people want fandom and buzz to exist around things, and it's generally a good idea to be aware of the fan base of something, but at the same time you don't want people to get caught up in everything that's going on surrounding something and let that detract from the quality of whatever's being created. I'm interested if anybody else has any other opinions on this. I know there are plenty of people out there who don't share my opinions, if anybody else cares about this at all. Otherwise, that's all I've got. I will try to be back soon, but I will make you no promises. If you miss me, feel free to follow me on other websites for more up-to-date rambles like this, sporadic life, updates, mediocre attempts at humor, Otherwise, I'm gonna go be late for class, so bye.